If we think about those extra 2 billion mouths, we've had to feed an extra 2 billion mouths that have come onto the planet just in the last decade as well. So it is a huge challenge, and we're doing that against a backdrop of climate change in a very polluted planet, massive issues about sustainability. So in the context of the UK, I personally say we are not in a particularly good place. Just in the 1970s, we could produce 70% of all the food that we eat, and now it's about 50%. And the trend is continuing to be, let's import more food and let's produce less at home.
So what are the most urgent changes governments today and in the future have to make, or in the short term, perhaps?
There has to be the decisions about science and technology, for instance. Well, I will say that because I'm a scientist, but there are so many things we could do in terms of improving our production, so many things we could do to make foods in terms of improving the nutrients that are involved in them. And a lot of those things people have shied away for because, again, it's back to politics. Do people really want to adopt things like GM foods and gene editing, the use of robotics, the use of things like hydroponics, which are incredibly elegant ways where we can boost our food production here and actually reduce our environmental footprint at the same time.
So is European agriculture too old-fashioned?
For many, many years, we have had a system in Europe where farmers have been subsidized, and the subsidies have been about not innovating. It has been absolutely counter to what we really should have been doing right across Europe for a long period of time. Now, that is changing and changing very quickly. We've got the big green agenda in Europe now trying to say is that farmers have to change the way that they do things, and subsidies should be based about environmental footprint, about producing more with less inputs now. I mean, the biggest dangers on our planet are absolutely the change to our climate. And in my institute, we monitor crop failures, and we just see more and more of them happening in different parts of the world. So what we've got to do is to build in Europe and in the UK much better systems to feed ourselves going forward.
Is it possible to have an equitable distribution of food around the world?
Well, Stephen, there's nearly 8 billion people on the planet, and the stats will show about 1 billion people are currently undernourished. They don't get enough food, yet there is more than enough food produced in the world to feed 8 billion people. So there is massive issues about the equality of our global food supply system. We waste so much of it. In fact, we waste about a third of all that we produce. Even just to tackle food waste, you can see would have such a dramatic impact, particularly in developing countries.
You can go to any supermarket in Britain and in many places in Europe, and you'll see foods from all over the world in front of you. Many years ago, you would only eat food from that season. So is that the problem? And I wonder whether the pandemic has highlighted this problem of bringing in so much food from different parts of the world.
Yeah, the food system really over the last decade has been truly globalized. It's the world's true global industry. Quite often we don't know what we eat. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know how it's being produced. And I often use strawberries. Why should we possibly think that we can eat strawberries 365 days a year? Because the environmental footprint of us eating strawberries in November, December, January, it's shocking because they have been transported very, very long distances. So getting back to eating local food produced at different times of the year should also be part of what we think about in terms of a sustainable food system.
Can I ask you too about some of the scandals that you've highlighted? I'm thinking about the horse meat scandal and others. Are there still scandals to be uncovered, do you think?
Well, that's my day job, actually, Stephen. I look at problems in the global food supply system. We look at points of vulnerability where fraud might happen, and we see fraud happening 365 days of the year in lots and lots of different foodstuffs and food commodities and food ingredients, because you can make more money out of food fraud than you can out of heroin trade. There's more money made out of food fraud than heroin. So just put that into context. It's not going to disappear overnight for sure.
And if we can sort of go back to sustainability, and I wonder if sustainability is considered enough by governments and the policy makers. In other words, can we consume food sustainably, i.e. without harming the planet?
Well, the answer is that's exactly what we have to do. There isn't a plan B here. No famous government plan Bs for this one. But it takes really brave leadership, because to eat food sustainably will probably mean the cost of food will increase. And there's all of the social issues around that. It probably means, as you and I were talking about, less choices of food. But it is a must. We must deliver a sustainable food system for the planet. There is no other option.
The UK recently published its first food security report in a decade. And during those 10 years, we've seen both Brexit and COVID. What were the report's findings, the main findings?
Well, really, I mean, I very much welcome the fact that after a decade, we're coming to the place where we've got a food security plan. But also, you know, we had published a national food strategy not so long ago, and there seems to be, you know, variances in terms of what the national food strategy says and the food security strategy. So I think that really has to come together. In terms of Brexit, all that has done is it has highlighted the fact that we import so much food from Europe, particularly fresh produce. What COVID has shown is the complexity of the global food supply system, where suddenly, because the container ships are out of place, because people in developing worlds are getting badly affected by COVID, suddenly food supplies are changing. And you know, the gaps on the supermarket shelves were very, very apparent for a number of months. And despite all of those massive issues, our food industry in the UK was really able to step up to the mark and fill those shelves. Will they be able to do the same thing 1, 2, 3 years from now? I have more doubts about it.
I'm a little older than a millennial is, Chris, and I'm wondering whether some of the foods millennials love, I'm talking about smashed avocado, may well have to perhaps take a back seat to foods that are grown more in the UK and Europe. In other words, we might have to change our diets in future.
Well, I think we're all going to have to change our diets. And you know, highlighting avocados is a very good example, actually, because most of the world's avocados are grown in California. California has a massive water deficit, yet they're using huge amounts of water to produce avocados so they can export it. The reason they do it is to get so much money for it. So I think in terms of what we are doing, in fact, we have founded an organization called Foundation Earth. What we want to do is have on every food produce in the UK a label to talk about its sustainability credentials. And I think that will surprise many people in terms of how sustainable some foodstuffs really are.
Professor Chris Elliott, many thanks for joining us here on The Agenda.
My pleasure.